I'm Miriam, 34, a single mother to my beautiful 6-year-old son Noah. His severe asthma has always been challenging, but nothing prepared me for seeing him fighting for his life in the ICU last month. What broke me wasn't just his struggling breaths, but watching my parents walk out of his hospital room saying those words I'll never forget. "He'll be fine. Your brother's birthday is once a year." Before I share how my family abandoned my son when he needed them most, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt let down by the people who should have been there for you. Life as a single mom hasn't been easy, especially these past 2 years since the divorce. Noah's father, James, is barely in the picture, sending the minimum child support when he remembers and calling maybe once a month. I've been working as a paralegal at Wilson & Associates law firm for 7 years now. The hours are long, but my boss Diana has been understanding about my situation, letting me work from home when Noah's asthma acts up. Noah and I have our special rituals that make our little family feel complete. Saturday mornings are for pancakes with faces made of fruit. Sunday afternoons are for board games or visits to the Children's Museum when he's feeling well enough. Those quiet moments when he's curled against me reading bedtime stories are what keep me going through the tough days. Noah was diagnosed with severe asthma when he was 3. That first hospitalization terrified me, watching his tiny chest struggle for air, the doctors rushing around with oxygen masks and nebulizers. Since then, we've had more emergency room visits than I can count. I've become fluent in medical terminology, learned to distinguish between his regular wheeze and the dangerous one that means we need to head to the hospital immediately. My purse is always stocked with his inhalers, spacers, and emergency contact information. The medical bills have been overwhelming, even with insurance. There were months I had to choose between paying for his medications or our electricity bill. I started doing freelance legal research on weekends while Noah napped, just to keep us afloat financially. But somehow, we've managed to make it work, just the two of us. My relationship with my parents, Sandra and Richard, has always been complicated. Growing up, it was clear that my younger brother Kyle was their favorite. He got the bigger bedroom, newer clothes, and more attention at school events. When I got an A on my report card, they'd nod approvingly. When Kyle got a B, they'd take him out for ice cream to celebrate. After my divorce, their subtle criticism became more pronounced. "Maybe if you hadn't worked so much, James wouldn't have felt neglected," Mom would say, completely ignoring that James had been cheating for years. "Noah needs a father figure. You should try dating again." Dad would suggest, as if finding a replacement dad was as simple as ordering takeout. Their relationship with Noah was loving but inconsistent. They'd shower him with gifts on birthdays and Christmas, but rarely showed up for his t-ball games or school performances. When he was hospitalized for asthma last year, they visited, once stayed for 30 minutes, then left because they had tickets to a show they didn't want to waste. My brother Kyle has always been the golden child. At 30, he still lives in our parents' rental property, paying minimal rent, jumps between jobs whenever he gets bored, and expects everyone to drop everything when he needs something. He's charming and funny, the life of every party, but responsibility has never been his strong suit. His upcoming 30th birthday had been the main topic of my parents' conversations for months. Mom had been planning an elaborate celebration at an expensive restaurant, inviting extended family and Kyle's large circle of friends. Dad had taken time off work to help with preparations. Meanwhile, when I mentioned Noah's upcoming school play, they said they'd try to make it, but weren't sure if they could fit it into their schedule. The week before Kyle's birthday, Noah's asthma started acting up. It began with a slight cough that gradually worsened. I gave him his regular medications and kept him home from school, working remotely to monitor him. By Wednesday, I was getting concerned. He was using his rescue inhaler more frequently, and his breathing seemed labored even when resting. I had a major project due at work that Friday, something I couldn't postpone. When I called my parents to ask if they could watch Noah for a few hours while I finished it up, they agreed. But I could hear the distraction in Mom's voice as she discussed party favor options with someone in the background. "Of course we'll watch him," she said. "But remember, we need Thursday and Friday for Kyle's birthday preparations. The party's on Saturday and we still have so much to do." I assured her I only needed a few hours of their time on Wednesday. Little did I know that those few hours would turn into a crisis none of us saw coming. Wednesday afternoon started normally enough. I dropped Noah off at my parents' house with his medication bag, detailed instructions, and emergency contacts. He was tired and wheezing slightly, but nothing that seemed unusual for a mild asthma flare-up. "Call me immediately if his breathing gets worse," I told Mom as I handed over his spacer and inhaler. "You worry too much, Miriam," she replied, waving away my concerns. "We raised 2 children, we know what to do. Go finish your work." I kissed Noah goodbye and headed to the office to complete my project. 3 hours later, my phone rang. It was Dad, his voice tight with worry. "Noah's having trouble breathing. We've already given him his inhaler twice, but it's not helping. His lips are looking bluish." My heart dropped. "Call 911 right now, I'm on my way." The 20-minute drive to their house was the longest of my life. By the time I arrived, the ambulance was already there. Paramedics were placing an oxygen mask over Noah's small face. His eyes were wide with fear, his chest heaving with the effort to breathe. I rushed to his side, trying to stay calm for his sake while terror coursed through me. "Mommy," he gasped behind the mask, reaching for my hand. "It hurts." "I know, baby. I'm right here," I said, fighting back tears. "The doctors are going to help you feel better." The ride to the hospital was a blur of sirens and medical terminology. The paramedics were inserting an IV, checking his oxygen levels, radioing ahead to the emergency room. All I could do was hold Noah's hand and pray harder than I ever had before. At the hospital, everything happened with frightening speed. Doctors and nurses swarmed around Noah, attaching monitors, administering medications, consulting in hushed, urgent tones. A respiratory therapist arrived with a nebulizer treatment. The attending physician, Dr. Patel, spoke to me in the direct but compassionate way that told me this was serious. "Noah's having a severe asthmatic episode that's not responding adequately to the initial treatments. We need to admit him to the pediatric intensive care unit for closer monitoring and more aggressive intervention." Within an hour, we were settled in the PICU. Noah lay in a hospital bed that seemed to swallow his small frame, connected to monitors that beeped constantly, an IV delivering medications to help him breathe. The room was cold and sterile, filled with equipment I couldn't name, but knew was keeping my son alive. Dr. Patel explained that Noah's condition was unstable. His oxygen levels were dangerously low, and his body was working too hard to breathe. They were giving him intravenous steroids, continuous nebulizer treatments, and supplemental oxygen, but he wasn't improving as quickly as they hoped. "The next 24 hours are critical," she said. "We need to watch him very closely." I called my parents from Noah's bedside, exhaustion and fear making my voice shake. "Noah's in the PICU. It's bad. The doctors are saying it's one of the worst asthma attacks they've seen in a child his age." "Oh dear," Mom said. "We'll be there soon. Just need to finish up a few things here first." They arrived 3 hours later, carrying a bag with some clothes and toiletries they'd packed from my apartment. Dad looked genuinely concerned, but Mom seemed distracted, checking her phone every few minutes. "How is he?" Dad asked, looking at Noah's sleeping form. "Not good," I said, wiping away tears. "They're talking about possible intubation if he doesn't improve by morning." Mom nodded, but her attention was on her buzzing phone. "Kyle's calling about the party decorations. I need to take this." She stepped out of the room while Dad awkwardly patted my shoulder. When she returned, their conversation revolved around party preparations, occasionally interrupted by comments about Noah's condition. "The caterer called. There's an issue with the menu," Dad said. "I'll call them back," Mom replied, then glanced at Noah. "He's sleeping now. That's good, right?" I nodded numbly, too tired to point out that he was sedated, not peacefully sleeping. As the hours passed, their visits to Noah's room became shorter, punctuated by longer absences to make calls about the party. My resentment grew, but I channeled all my energy into focusing on Noah, speaking softly to him, even while sedated, holding his hand and coordinating with the medical team. Kyle called that evening, and I could hear his voice through Mom's phone as she stood in the corner of the room. "Is the ice sculpture confirmed? And what about the DJ? Did you pick up my suit from the dry cleaner?" When Mom mentioned they were at the hospital with Noah, his response made my blood boil. "Seriously, now the party's in 2 days. Can't Miriam handle it by herself? It's just asthma, right?" Later, Mom relayed Kyle's concern for Noah, but mentioned he was stressed about the birthday preparations. She suggested that perhaps one of them should leave to help with the party details. Your brother only turns 30 once, she said. We've put so much into making this special. I stared at her in disbelief. Noah is in intensive care, Mom. The doctors aren't sure if he's going to be okay. You're being dramatic, Miriam. Children bounce back quickly. Noah's had asthma attacks before. Not like this, I insisted. This is different. The night passed in a haze of medical interventions and whispered conversations with nurses. My parents left around 9, promising to return in the morning. I slept in a chair beside Noah's bed, waking at every change in his breathing or beeping from the monitors. By morning, Noah's condition remained serious. The medical team adjusted his medications, added another breathing treatment, and continued to monitor him closely. Dr. Patel's furrowed brow told me more than her carefully chosen words about his progress. My parents returned mid-morning, bringing coffee and a sandwich for me, which I appreciated, despite my growing frustration with their divided attention. The tension in the room was palpable, with nurses noticing and offering sympathetic glances my way. Mom, Dad, I said finally, I need you to understand how serious this is. The doctor said Noah isn't responding to treatment as expected. They're concerned about his heart rate and the strain on his lungs. We understand, dear, Mom said, but her eyes drifted to her watch. It's just that we have so many things to coordinate before tomorrow. I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. What could possibly be more important than Noah right now? It's not about importance, Dad interjected. It's about managing multiple responsibilities. The nurse Jessica, who had been adjusting Noah's IV, gave me a supportive look before leaving the room. Later, she stopped me in the hallway. Family can be complicated during crises, she said gently. Focus on your son. We're here to support you both. Her kindness nearly broke me, and I fought back tears as I returned to Noah's room. On the third day in the PICU, Noah's condition took a frightening turn for the worse. His oxygen saturation dropped suddenly, triggering alarms and bringing medical staff rushing into the room. Dr. Patel ordered additional medications and increased his oxygen support. We're seeing signs of respiratory fatigue, she explained. His body is getting tired from working so hard to breathe. We're going to try a different combination of medications, but I want to prepare you for the possibility that we may need to intubate him if his condition doesn't improve. The words hit me like a physical blow. Intubation meant a breathing tube, a ventilator. It meant Noah's condition was life-threatening. When the medical team left, I locked myself in the small bathroom attached to Noah's room and finally broke down, sobbing silently into a hospital towel. I allowed myself 5 minutes of complete despair before washing my face, taking deep breaths, and returning to my son's side. He needed me to be strong. My parents had stepped out during the medical emergency, and when they returned, I explained the new developments with a shaking voice. The doctors are really concerned. They might have to put him on a ventilator. Mom and Dad exchanged glances before Mom set her purse on the visitor chair and straightened her jacket. Miriam, we need to talk to you about tomorrow. Something in her tone made my stomach clench. What about tomorrow? Kyle's birthday party is tomorrow evening. Dad said, his voice carefully neutral. We've put months of planning into this celebration. I stared at them, not comprehending. And we need to be there, Mom said. The caterers need direction, the venue needs to be decorated, and Kyle needs our support on his special day. The realization of what they were saying hit me like a slap. You're leaving now when Noah is fighting for his life. Don't be so dramatic, Mom sighed. The doctors and nurses are taking good care of him. He'll be fine. Your brother's birthday is once a year. I felt like I was in some kind of nightmare. Are you serious right now? Noah could be put on a ventilator at any moment? And if that happens, you'll call us, Dad said reasonably. The party is only a few hours. We'll have our phones with us. I can't believe what I'm hearing, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm for Noah's sake. My son, your grandson, is critically ill and you're choosing a birthday party over him. We're not choosing one over the other, Mom said, her tone becoming defensive. We're simply managing our family obligations. Kyle would be devastated if we weren't there after all the planning. And what about Noah? I demanded. What about his devastation at seeing his grandparents walk out when he's scared and in pain? Noah's sedated half the time anyway, Dad pointed out. He probably won't even notice we're gone. I can't believe you just said that, I whispered, shock replacing anger. He's not sedated, he's medicated. He knows exactly what's happening around him. The argument continued as they gathered their things. Each justification they offered only deepened my sense of betrayal. They suggested I was overreacting, that the medical staff had everything under control, that family celebrations were important for maintaining normalcy. Just call if anything changes, Mom said, adjusting her designer handbag on her shoulder. We'll come back right away if there's an emergency. This is an emergency, I said, gesturing to Noah's hospital bed. He's in the intensive care unit. How much more emergency does it need to be? Noah stirred at the sound of raised voices, his eyes fluttering open. Grandma, Grandpa, he called weakly through his oxygen mask. Where you going? Mom approached his bed, patting his hand. Grandma and Grandpa have to help with Uncle Kyle's birthday party, sweetie. We'll come back to visit you soon. Noah's face fell confusion and hurt, evident even through his exhaustion. But I'm sick. The doctors are taking good care of you, Dad said cheerfully. And Mommy's staying right here. Jessica, the nurse who had been so kind to us, entered the room to check Noah's monitors. She took in the scene with a quick professional glance, but I could see the judgment in her eyes as my parents made their excuses to leave. After they left, Jessica adjusted Noah's blankets with gentle hands. Is there anyone else I can call for you? She asked quietly. Other family or friends who could come sit with you for a while? I shook my head, fighting back tears. It's just us. The hours that followed were some of the loneliest of my life. Noah drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes asking for his grandparents, sometimes too, focused on his struggle to breathe, to notice anything else. I maintained a constant one-sided conversation with him, telling him stories, reminding him of happy memories, promising him that he would feel better soon. The PICU was eerily quiet at night, the darkness broken only by the glow of monitors and the occasional hushed conversations of the night staff. During a brief period when Noah was sleeping relatively peacefully, I checked my phone more out of habit than expectation. My social media feed was flooded with photos from Kyle's party preparations. Mom arranging elaborate flower centerpieces, Dad setting up the sound system, Kyle posing with his custom-made birthday cake. The contrast between their festive activities and my hospital vigil was surreal. The final straw was a video Kyle posted of his birthday speech, raising a champagne glass, while thanking our parents for always being there no matter what. The comments section was filled with praise for my parents' dedication and support. I turned off my phone, set it face down on the windowsill, and returned to my son's bedside. From that moment, I focused entirely on Noah, shutting out everything else. Whatever remained of my relationship with my parents could wait. My son couldn't. Shortly after midnight, Noah's condition deteriorated rapidly. His oxygen saturation plummeted, his heart rate increased alarmingly, and his breathing became even more labored despite the medications and oxygen support. Dr. Patel was called in along with a respiratory specialist. They worked quickly, adjusting settings, administering new medications, checking and rechecking his vital signs. His body is tiring, Dr. Patel explained. We're reaching the point where we need to consider intubation to give his lungs a chance to rest and heal. Will he be in pain? I asked, my voice barely audible. He'll be sedated and comfortable, she assured me. It sounds frightening, but it's often the best way to help a patient through a severe asthma crisis like this. I nodded, numb with fear. Do whatever you need to do to save him. I called my parents, the phone ringing several times before my father answered. Music and laughter echoed in the background. Dad, you need to come back to the hospital right now, I said without preamble. Noah's getting worse. They're talking about putting him on a ventilator. What? I can barely hear you, he shouted over the noise. The party's in full swing. Can you text the details? We'll check in when things quiet down. Dad! I almost screamed into the phone. Noah might be put on life support tonight. Do you understand what I'm saying? Of course I understand, he replied, his voice suddenly serious. But there's nothing we can do right now. The doctors know what they're doing. Just keep us updated. The call ended, and I stood frozen, phone in hand, until a gentle touch on my shoulder brought me back to reality. Jessica, still on duty, had returned with another nurse. "We're going to need you to step out for a few minutes while we perform some procedures," she said. "There's a family room down the hall where you can wait." I nodded mutely and followed her directions. In the empty family room, I tried calling my parents again, then my brother. No one answered. I sent desperate text messages that went unread. Finally, I gave up and sat alone, head in my hands, praying with more fervor than I ever had before. When I was allowed back into Noah's room, the medical team had stabilized him temporarily. They had added another medication to his IV and adjusted his respiratory support. Dr. Patel explained they would continue monitoring him closely and make the decision about intubation within the next few hours. "Is there anyone who can stay with you?" she asked kindly. "This is a lot for one person to handle alone." "No," I said simply. "It's just me." Jessica, finishing her shift, squeezed my hand before leaving. "I'll be back tomorrow," she promised. "He's fighting hard and so are you. Don't give up." The night stretched endlessly, each minute marked by the beeping of machines and the sight of my son's chest rising and falling with painful effort. I didn't leave his side, not even to use the bathroom, afraid that if I turned away for a moment, something irreversible would happen. I spoke to him continuously, even when he wasn't conscious enough to respond. I promised him trips to Disney World, puppies, ice cream for breakfast, anything and everything I could think of that might give him something to fight for. "You and me against the world, buddy," I whispered, holding his limp hand. "Just like always." As dawn broke, casting pale light through the hospital window, Noah's monitors showed the first subtle improvement. His oxygen levels rose slightly. His heart rate became less erratic. Dr. Patel, reviewing his charts during morning rounds, allowed herself a cautious nod. "He's responding to the new medication combination," she said. "It's a small improvement, but it's moving in the right direction. If this trend continues, we might avoid intubation." The relief was so intense I nearly collapsed. I excused myself to the bathroom, locked the door, and sobbed silently, releasing the terror that had built up through the night. When I regained composure, I splashed cold water on my face and looked at myself in the mirror. I barely recognized the exhausted, hollow-eyed woman staring back at me. In that moment of clarity, I realized something fundamental had changed. My parents' absence during the darkest hours of Noah's crisis wasn't just a disappointment or a temporary hurt. It was a revelation about the true nature of our family dynamic, one I had been avoiding for years. The realization was painful, but also strangely liberating. For the first time, I saw clearly that I needed to stop expecting my parents to be people they weren't capable of being. Noah and I deserved better than half-hearted conditional support. As I returned to Noah's bedside, my phone showed multiple missed calls and messages from my parents, and Kyle finally responding to my desperate communications from the night before. I put the phone away without reading them. Whatever they had to say could wait. Noah couldn't. Throughout that day, small signs of support arrived from unexpected sources. Diana. My boss sent an email extending my emergency leave indefinitely and assuring me my job was secure. Jen, a coworker I'd always been friendly with but never particularly close to, appeared with a bag containing fresh clothes, toiletries, and homemade sandwiches. "The office took up a collection," she explained, setting a gift card for the hospital cafe on the bedside table. "We're all pulling for Noah. Let me know if you need anything else." I was touched beyond words. This woman who owed me nothing had driven across town during her lunch break to bring me essentials. Meanwhile, my own parents had chosen a birthday party over their critically ill grandson. Later that afternoon, Samir, the father of another child in the PICU, stopped by with coffee and a sympathetic ear. We'd exchanged brief greetings in the family room, but now he offered genuine support. "My daughter has been here for 2 weeks," he said. "I know how it feels to be alone with your fears. If you need a break, even just to shower or get some real food, I can sit with your son." The hospital social worker, Mrs. Abernathy, visited to offer resources and support services. "This is a traumatic experience," she acknowledged. "For both of you, there's help available when you're ready." These kindnesses from relative strangers stood in stark contrast to my family's abandonment. As Noah continued to show small signs of improvement throughout the day, I began to recognize that we had a support system after all. It just wasn't the one I'd always counted on. By evening, Noah was conscious enough to ask simple questions and respond to the doctors. His breathing was still labored, but the crisis point had passed. He was fighting his way back. "Where Grandma and Grandpa?" he asked weakly. I hesitated, unwilling to burden him with adult conflicts, but equally unwilling to lie. "They had to go to Uncle Kyle's party, sweetheart. But the doctors and nurses have been taking such good care of you, and I haven't left once." He considered this for a moment. "You stayed all time, every minute I promised, and I'm not going anywhere." He nodded, seemingly satisfied, and drifted back to sleep, his hand still clutching mine. In that moment, watching his peaceful face, I knew with complete certainty that I would do whatever necessary to protect him, not just from asthma attacks, but from conditional love and painful disappointments, even if that meant redefining what family meant for us. Noah improved steadily over the next 2 days. His breathing eased, his color returned, and the doctors began gradually reducing his medications. He was still in the PICU, still requiring constant monitoring, but the worst had passed. He was going to recover. I maintained my vigil, leaving his side only for brief, necessary breaks. Hospital staff brought in a cot so I could sleep beside him, though rest was still elusive. Every cough or change in his breathing woke me instantly alert for signs of another downturn. On the afternoon of the 3rd day after Kyle's party, my parents arrived at the hospital. They were dressed casually, as if for a normal visit, carrying a plastic container of cake and wearing expectant smiles. "We brought leftover birthday cake," Mom announced, holding up the container. "Kyle's favorite German chocolate. Noah might enjoy a treat now that he's feeling better." I stared at them, speechless. They were acting as if nothing unusual had happened, as if abandoning their grandson in intensive care was a normal occurrence that required no acknowledgement. "How's our brave boy doing?" Dad asked, approaching Noah's bed. Noah, more alert now, but still weak, brightened at seeing his grandparents. "Grandpa, did you have cake at the party?" "The biggest cake you've ever seen?" Dad replied, ruffling Noah's hair gently. "And guess what? We saved you a piece." The casual conversation continued, with my parents describing party details to Noah, showing him photos on their phones, acting for all the world, like this was a normal hospital visit following a minor illness. The disconnect between their behavior and the reality of what had transpired was staggering. After about 15 minutes, I couldn't take it anymore. "Noah, sweetheart, I need to talk to Grandma and Grandpa outside for a minute. We'll be right back." Noah nodded, already distracted by the game on Dad's phone. I led my parents into the hallway toward a small consultation room I knew would be empty. Once inside, I closed the door and faced them. "Do you have any idea what happened after you left?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "We know Noah had a rough night," Mom said defensively. "We got your messages in the morning and called right back." "A rough night," I repeated incredulously. "He nearly died. They were preparing to put him on a ventilator. I was alone, terrified that I was going to lose my son while you were popping champagne and cutting cake." "Now that's not fair," Dad interjected. "We were worried sick about Noah. We checked our phones constantly." "Not constantly enough to answer when I called repeatedly to tell you they were considering life support," I countered. "Not enough to leave a party when your grandson was fighting for his life." "Miriam, you've always been prone to dramatics," Mom sighed. "The doctors clearly had everything under control. Noah's fine now, isn't he?" "No thanks to you," I said. "And this isn't just about Noah's health crisis. It's about a pattern that's existed my entire life. Kyle has always come first. My needs and now Noah's have always been secondary." "That's ridiculous," Dad said. "We love you and Noah. We've always been there for you." "Been there?" I laughed bitterly. "Where were you when Noah had his school play? Or his t-ball championship? Where were you 2 nights ago when doctors were telling me he might not make it through the night?" "We've had this conversation before," Mom said dismissively. "We can't be everywhere at once. We do our best to balance our time between both our children and grandchildren." Balance. I shook my head in disbelief. Kyle doesn't have children. He barely has responsibilities. Yet somehow his birthday party was more important than Noah's life. "You're being unfair," Dad insisted. "It was an important milestone for Kyle." And this was a life or death situation for Noah, I countered. Those two things aren't comparable. The conversation continued in circles with my parents, deflecting, minimizing, and occasionally attempting to guilt me for being ungrateful for all they'd done. It became increasingly clear that they would never acknowledge the depth of their betrayal or take responsibility for their choices. As we returned to Noah's room, I felt a strange calm replace my anger. The confrontation hadn't gone as I'd hoped, but it had confirmed what I needed to know. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a one-time lapse in judgment. It was who they were. 20 minutes after my parents arrived, Kyle showed up carrying birthday gifts and a photo album. "There's my favorite nephew," he exclaimed as if he were visiting Noah after a minor cold, rather than a life-threatening medical emergency. "Wait till you see what Uncle Kyle got for his birthday, and look at these cool party pictures." Kyle proceeded to show Noah photos of the celebration, pointing out the decorations, the fancy food, the crowds of people having fun. He didn't seem to notice or care about the oxygen tubing still attached to Noah's face or the IV in his arm. "Mom and Dad threw the best party ever," Kyle gushed. "Everyone's still talking about it." "I'm glad it was worth it," I said quietly. Kyle looked up, finally noticing my expression. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," I replied. "I'm just glad the party was successful enough to justify leaving Noah in intensive care." "Oh, come on." Kyle rolled his eyes. "Don't be so dramatic. Kids get sick all the time. Noah's fine." "He's fine now," I corrected. "He wasn't fine when you were calling Mom and Dad to complain about party decorations while he couldn't breathe. He wasn't fine when they left him to attend your birthday, and he certainly wasn't fine when doctors were telling me he might need to be intubated." Kyle had the grace to look momentarily uncomfortable before shrugging it off. "Well, everything worked out right. No harm done." His casual dismissal of Noah's suffering and my anguish was the final confirmation I needed. This wasn't just my parents' problem. The entire family dynamic was toxic, built on uneven foundations of favoritism and conditional support. As I watched my brother continue showing party photos to Noah, who was too young and too kind to understand the significance of what had happened, I made a decision. Things would change starting today. Noah and I deserved better, and if my family couldn't provide the love and support we needed, I would find it elsewhere. That evening after my family left, I spoke with the hospital therapist who was available for parents of critically ill children. I explained the situation, the years of subtle favoritism culminating in this ultimate betrayal. "What you're describing is a pattern of emotional neglect," she said gently. "It's not uncommon, but it is damaging both to you and potentially to Noah as he grows older." "I don't want him to grow up feeling second best," I said firmly. "Like I did." "Then you'll need to establish clear boundaries," she advised. "It won't be easy, especially with family patterns that are so deeply established, but it's possible." We discussed practical strategies for setting limits with my parents and brother, ways to protect Noah from the hurt of unreliable relationships, and resources for building a stronger support network outside my family of origin. It was a difficult conversation, but also deeply relieving. For the first time, I felt validated in my perception of the family dynamic. I wasn't overreacting or being dramatic. I was responding appropriately to years of subtle emotional wounds that had culminated in this unmistakable betrayal. As I returned to Noah's bedside that night, watching him sleep peacefully with improved breathing, I felt a complex mixture of grief and determination. The family I had always hoped for might not exist, but I could still create something better for Noah. Starting now. A week after the crisis, Noah was discharged from the hospital. His lungs had recovered enough for him to return home, though, with additional medications and more frequent follow-up appointments. The moment we walked out of the hospital doors together, Noah holding my hand and breathing the fresh air, was one of the most profound relief I'd ever experienced. The medical team had prepared us thoroughly for his continued recovery. Dr. Patel had spent extra time explaining his new medication regimen and warning signs to watch for. Jessica, the nurse who had been so kind during our darkest hours, made a special trip to say goodbye on her day off, bringing Noah a stuffed dragon for bravery. "You're one of the strongest families I've seen come through here," she told me quietly. Most people don't have to face something like this alone. Her words stayed with me as we settled back into our apartment. It was strange to think of Noah and me as strong when I had felt so terrified and helpless throughout the ordeal. But looking back, I realized we had survived not just Noah's medical crisis, but also the painful revelation about my family's true priorities. I transformed our apartment into a peaceful recovery space for Noah. I replaced the living room rug that had always triggered his allergies, installed an air purifier in his bedroom, and created a cozy reading nook where we could spend quiet time together as he regained his strength. These physical changes mirrored the emotional boundaries I was beginning to establish. My parents called daily after our return home, suddenly attentive now that the crisis had passed and Kyle's birthday was over. They offered to come over, bring meals, watch Noah while I ran errands. Each time I politely but firmly declined. We're still settling into our routine, I would say. Noah needs calm and consistency right now. After a week of these gentle deflections, Mom became frustrated. Are you punishing us, Miriam? Because that's what it feels like. I'm not punishing anyone, I replied calmly. I'm creating the stable environment Noah needs to recover. The truth was more complicated, of course. I needed time and space to process what had happened and decide what kind of relationship with my parents would be healthy for Noah and me going forward. I was neither ready to forgive nor willing to pretend nothing had happened. I started seeing a therapist of my own, using the Employee Assistance Program from work. Dr. Winters helped me navigate the complex emotions of grief, anger, and disappointment, while supporting me in establishing healthier boundaries. Your parents may never acknowledge the hurt they've caused, she warned during one session. Are you prepared for that possibility? It was a difficult question to confront, but I knew the answer. I have to be. Noah's well-being depends on it. Kyle was less subtle in his reaction to my new boundaries. He called one evening, voice tight with indignation. What's going on with you? Mom and Dad say you won't let them see Noah. That's not true, I replied. I've just asked for some space while Noah recovers. This is ridiculous, he snapped. You're dividing the family over one missed hospital visit. It wasn't a visit, Kyle. Noah was fighting for his life. And this isn't about one incident. It's about a lifetime of patterns that I'm no longer willing to accept. So you're just going to cut everyone off, real mature Miriam? I'm not cutting anyone off. I'm establishing boundaries that protect my son. From his grandparents, Kyle scoffed. You're being ridiculous. They love Noah. Love isn't just a feeling, Kyle. It's showing up when someone needs you. He hung up without responding. It hurt, but it also reinforced my resolve. If my brother couldn't understand the gravity of what had happened, that was his limitation, not mine. Noah, meanwhile, was processing the changes in his own way. He asked about his grandparents, occasionally wondering why they weren't visiting as often. I was careful to be honest without burdening him with adult conflicts. Grandma and Grandpa love you very much, I assured him. Right now, we're focusing on helping you get better. They'll visit when the time is right. Are you mad at them? He asked perceptively one evening. I considered my answer carefully. I was disappointed by some choices they made. Sometimes adults disagree about important things and they need time to work it out. He nodded, seemingly satisfied with this explanation. Like when Zach and I fought about the swing at recess, but now we're friends again. Something like that. I smiled, grateful for his simple wisdom. But bigger problems sometimes take longer to solve. What surprised and touched me most during this period was the emergence of a support system I hadn't fully appreciated before. Diana from work organized a meal train among my colleagues, ensuring we had home-cooked dinners delivered 3 times a week during Noah's recovery. Jen, who had brought supplies to the hospital, began stopping by regularly to check on us and occasionally take Noah for ice cream when he was feeling stronger. Parents from Noah's school, many of whom I had only known through brief exchanges at pickup and drop-off, reached out with offers of playdates and carpools once he was well enough to return. Our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, who had always been friendly but distant, began bringing over her famous chicken soup and sitting with Noah when I needed to run errands. I even reconnected with several friends who had drifted away during my marriage and its aftermath. Sarah, my college roommate who now lived across town, called after hearing about Noah's hospitalization through mutual friends. Our reunion over coffee while Noah had a playdate turned into weekly meetups that reminded me of who I had been before my identity became wrapped up in family dynamics. Most surprising was the support group I joined for parents of children with chronic health conditions. Meeting other mothers and fathers who understood the fear, exhaustion, and vigilance required to care for a medically vulnerable child was profoundly validating. They didn't judge my decisions about family boundaries because many of them had faced similar challenges with well-meaning but unhelpful relatives. Family should make difficult situations easier, not harder, said Denise, a mother whose daughter had cystic fibrosis. Sometimes the hardest part is accepting that the support you need might come from people you never expected. Her words resonated deeply. As weeks passed, I realized we were building a chosen family around us, people who showed up consistently and without conditions. It wasn't the family structure I had grown up expecting, but it was stronger and more reliable than what I had known before. 6 months after Noah's hospitalization, our new normal was firmly established. His health had significantly improved with the adjusted medication regimen and environmental changes. The pulmonologist had praised his progress, calling him a model patient during our last checkup. My relationship with my parents had evolved into something more structured but ultimately healthier. After 2 months of minimal contact, I had agreed to regular Sunday afternoon visits with clear expectations about their behavior and involvement in Noah's life. They were no longer the emergency contacts on his school forms or the default babysitters when I needed help. Those roles had been filled by more reliable people in our expanded circle. Holidays looked different now. Instead of the tense, Kyle-centered gatherings at my parents' house, Noah and I had started our own traditions. Thanksgiving was a potluck with friends from the support group and their families. Christmas Eve was spent volunteering at the Children's Hospital, followed by a special dinner just for the two of us. Christmas Day included a brief visit with my parents, but we no longer stayed all day, subject to their schedule and preferences. Work had become more manageable too. Diana had approved a flexible schedule that allowed me to work from home 2 days a week, reducing Noah's time in after-school care and giving us more quality time together. My performance had actually improved once I stopped trying to please everyone and focused on what really mattered. The most significant change, though, was in my own sense of worth. Years of therapy had helped me recognize and heal patterns of people-pleasing and seeking validation from those who were incapable of providing it consistently. I had stopped making excuses for my parents' behavior and accepted them for who they were, while protecting myself and Noah from the hurt their limitations could cause. One spring afternoon, I finally had the conversation with my parents that I had been preparing for since the hospital. Noah was having a playdate at a friend's house, giving us uninterrupted time to talk honestly. I need to address something that's been unresolved between us. I began sitting across from them at their dining room table. What happened during Noah's hospitalization wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern that's existed my entire life. Mom immediately became defensive. "Are you still going on about that?" "It was months ago, Miriam. We've apologized repeatedly." "You've said you're sorry we were upset," I corrected gently. "That's not the same as acknowledging what actually happened or taking responsibility for your choices." "What do you want from us?" Dad asked, frustration evident in his voice. "We can't change the past." "I don't expect you to change the past. I'm talking about understanding the present and shaping the future. All my life, Kyle has been the priority. His needs, his wants, his celebrations have always come first. That didn't change even when Noah's life was at risk." "That's not true," Mom protested. "We love you and Noah." "I believe you do in your way," I acknowledged. "But love isn't just a feeling. It's actions. It's showing up when someone needs you, even when it's inconvenient." "We've always been there for you," Dad insisted. "Not when it mattered most," I replied firmly. "And I need you to understand that I can't allow Noah to grow up feeling second best the way I did. He deserves better, and so do I." The conversation continued for nearly 2 hours. There were moments of defensiveness, denial, and attempts to rewrite history, but there were also brief instances of clarity and partial acknowledgement. "Maybe we didn't always get the balance right," Dad conceded eventually. "Kyle was always more demanding of our attention." And maybe we should have left the party when you called about Noah's condition worsening, Mom added. We just didn't think it was as serious as you were making it sound. These weren't the full apologies or deep insights I might have hoped for, but they were steps toward honesty. I outlined my expectations moving forward: respect for the boundaries I set for Noah, no comparing him to Kyle's children when they eventually arrived, no last-minute cancellations of commitments made to him, and most importantly, no gaslighting about the past. I want Noah to have a relationship with his grandparents, I concluded. But it needs to be a healthy one built on reliability and respect. They agreed, though I suspected they still didn't fully grasp the depth of what I was asking. That was okay. I no longer needed their complete understanding or approval. I had found my own strength and clarity. The changes in our family dynamics rippled outward, affecting relationships with extended family as well. Some relatives supported my new boundaries, particularly my Aunt Linda, who had always seen the favoritism but felt powerless to address it. It's about time someone stood up to Sandra and Richard, she told me during a private conversation at a family gathering. You're breaking a cycle that's existed for generations in this family. Others were less supportive, pressuring me to forgive and forget for the sake of family harmony. I learned to respond to these pressures with calm confidence rather than defensive justification. I have forgiven, I would say. But forgetting would mean allowing the same patterns to continue, and that's not healthy for anyone, especially Noah. Even Kyle eventually showed signs of growth, though the process was slow and inconsistent. 6 months after our falling out, he called me with an unexpected request. I need your help with something, he admitted. I'm trying to get my life together, looking for a new job, maybe even my own place. I thought maybe you could help me update my resume. It was the first time in our adult lives that he had asked for my help rather than our parents. It was a small thing, but it represented a shift in how he saw me, and perhaps himself. As we worked together on his resume over coffee, he made an awkward but seemingly sincere comment. I've been thinking about what happened with Noah. I didn't get it then. I was just focused on my stupid party. But a guy at work has a kid with asthma, and he was telling me how scary the bad attacks can be. They are terrifying. I confirmed, not making it easier for him, but not shutting him down either. Yeah, so I just wanted to say I'm sorry for not being there for you guys. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was genuine progress. Our relationship would likely never be close, but perhaps it could be respectful and occasionally supportive. Holiday gatherings evolved into more balanced affairs, with my parents making visible efforts to divide their attention more equitably. They still slipped into old patterns occasionally, but now I had the confidence to address these moments directly, rather than silently accepting them. Noah thrived under the new family dynamic. His health improved significantly, with fewer asthma attacks and less severe symptoms when they did occur. His teachers commented on his increased confidence and participation in school activities. Most importantly, he seemed happier, more secure in his place in the world. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been moments of doubt, guilt, and grief for the family relationships I had always wanted, but never truly had. But watching Noah build a relationship with his grandparents based on mutual respect rather than obligation, seeing him surrounded by people who consistently showed up for him, made every difficult conversation and boundary worth it. Noah didn't just recover from asthma in that hospital. We both recovered our sense of worth and learned who truly deserved a place in our lives. The family we created might not look like the traditional version I once idealized, but it was stronger, healthier, and infinitely more reliable. 6 months after that terrifying night in the ICU, I realized that sometimes the most painful moments can become unexpected gifts. Noah's health crisis had forced me to see the truth of my family dynamics and find the courage to change what wasn't working. In fighting for my son's life, I had also found my own voice and worth. The journey continues with challenges and setbacks along the way, but now we face them together, surrounded by people who show their love not just through words, but through consistent presence and support. And in the end, that's what family should truly mean. Have you ever had to make difficult decisions about family relationships to protect yourself or your children? What boundaries have you found necessary for your own well-being? Share your experiences in the comments, and if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that. It's okay to prioritize emotional health, even when it means changing family dynamics. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the family we create is more important than the family we're born into.